This is a remarkable story you're about to hear, a compelling story, a story that you may not even believe, but we have Dianne Lake here, and she is living testimony to the truth of her strange odyssey. Now here's what was written about Dianne a few days ago, and I'm going to read you this. Dianne is a person with a big heart. To be able to look on her past with clarity and compassion, but no bitterness. And you will see why tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dianne Lake.
Thank you, Ivor.
Before we get going, I just wondered, you didn't know what I was going to play beforehand. So, Dianne, what went through your mind as you saw this? Can you give me a feedback?
I thought it was a nice overview video that I've seen bits and pieces of, but not in its entirety.
Yes.
And I think you picked out some interviewer comments that were appropriate.
Yes. Okay, so everybody wants to know, you were 14 at the time. How the heck did you land up with Manson at that tender age?
Oh my gosh. How much time do we have?
Keep it down to 45 minutes.
Well, my parents bought into Timothy Leary's turn on, tune in, and drop out. That was really kind of the beginning, and so we did drop out and ended up, as like a nomadic lifestyle along the, Pacific Ocean beaches of Malibu and Zuma. And I was the oldest of 3 children at 13, 14, and my parents ended up in Wavy Gravy. He became Wavy Gravy, but the hog farm. And I had gone off to San Francisco. And so they moved in there when I was in San Francisco. When I came back, I was looking to reconnect with them, and I wasn't really welcome at the hog farm because I was a sexually active underage, and I was considered jailbait. So I just didn't feel welcome there, and another couple came and they invited me to come and stay with them, and I did, and they took me to a party. We want you to meet this groovy guy and his girls, and it was Charlie and the girls. And they had made a trip up to the hog farm while I was in San Francisco and met my parents. And my mom, a lot of the girls were kind of more Midwestern, and we were from the Midwest. And so she kind of, clicked with them, and they took a little sojourn out into the Mojave Desert and got to know, my mom got to know the girls. And so they were going to go to San Francisco. So my mom gave them my picture because they were going to go to San Francisco, and that was the last place she knew I was. And so I guess she thought that, maybe they would find me and say hi or bring me home. We're not really sure, but so when I walked into this party, they all knew me. The girls greeted me warmly and hugged, and Charlie, Dianne is here, and I'm just like, what? I'm just overwhelmed and flabbergasted. And Charlie got up, offered me some of his root beer, invited me to come sit in the circle, and he's playing music, and there's drums, and the girls are singing, and it was just really it was refreshing, and he was kind of at that point playful and, very charismatic, very charismatic. And so that's how I met Charlie, and I kind of went back and forth between Charlie and the girls and the hog farm, but I just didn't feel welcome there. They wanted me to, sleep in the attic and kind of stay out of sight. So, and at that point, my parents had kind of committed to this commune where all the adults kind of watched over the kids. They weren't like these little nuclear families that composed the commune. I mean, there were, and I was an anomaly because I didn't have peers. At 14, there weren't hippie parents with 14-year-old girls in communes. I mean, there might have been, but not in my existence. There were little kids, lots of babies and little kids. And my brother was like 2 years younger, and my sister was 6 years younger than me. And so, even they didn't have a lot of peers. So anyway, that's how I met him. Did that answer some of your question?
Yes, it does. But one of the things, and maybe you're making an excuse for your parents, which you probably are, and what are we going to do? It's statute of limitations has gone. You said you were emancipated at 14. I mean, if there's anybody 14-year-olds out here, I mean, what did you mean by being emancipated?
Well, I would never emancipate my own 14-year-old daughter. I mean, good grief. Yeah. I mean, knowing, but see, we were in this alternative culture. I didn't know any better. We'd kind of been launched into this, and this is something that my parents accepted, and my mom really trusted God to take care of us. I mean, and that was part of the point of dropping out, was that my dad was totally anti-materialistic, and my mom was really trusting that this is what God wanted us to do. And so when we ended up visiting a family and taking acid with them, I really sincerely believed that God spoke to me out of the clouds and said, it's time for you to leave home. I mean, but we're on an acid trip, so in an orange grove. And so I went, but I took it seriously, and I went to my parents and I told them, I said I felt like God was telling me it was time to leave home, and I didn't want to stay with my family. My mom and dad were arguing about the role of a man, the role of a woman in this new, alternative culture, society. And I just didn't, I just didn't feel, my mom criticized me, my dad kind of criticized me, and so I wanted to live with this couple that we had met. And so they wrote me a note, and they went off to the Grand Canyon, and I stayed with them. And so for many months, I had that note in my pocket that, written by my parents, saying, and it was kind of like a impromptu, because it is, you can get a legal emancipation from your parents, but I mean, this was not any kind of a legal thing. This was just a note in my pocket.
Dianne, in your book, excellent book called, which you can get tonight, by the way, A Member of the Family, you wrote this. You said, I saw him as my protector, my guide, my lover and my friend. I trusted him to bring us to safety, and if some kind of race war was brewing, he would be the one to show us how to defend ourselves, or at least how to stay out of the line of fire. How did you so quickly develop that philosophy?
Oh, he fed it to us daily.
Yes.
And in fact, I mean, at one point I was out of his good graces because I didn't obey him. And so he did find my parents, and he took me back, and I just felt, and at that point they were working with an alternative high school, and they had a bunch of, kids my same age, that they were taking care of. And I'd been with Charlie for too long, hearing about this, the garbage dump and just all of his philosophy, the race war and all of that. And I just couldn't live outside of that realm. It made me feel crazy.
What was the garbage dump? Because I think
The world was the garbage dump.
Yes.
But we actually did do dumpster diving. That's where we got a lot of our food.
yes.
The back of the grocery stores.
And didn't you discover, and there you were diving in the garbage dumps, bringing out food that had been thrown away, which was actually,
Still good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. What kind of solace or satisfaction did you get from the other members of the family? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I've said this before, that we were like sister wives. I mean, we all were having sex with Charlie, but we all, supported one another in those, in the daily. I mean, we were a family in that, in order to survive, you've got to eat and shower and, you've got to take care of the babies. You've got to, that's just part of life. I mean, you can't really go without that. And so a lot of our day was taking, place fulfilling our needs.
There's something else I wanted to read to you, if I may. When I was prepping for my book, I spoke to a lawyer who became a judge called Burton Katz, and this is what he said. He said, the Manson girls were as schizophrenic and enigmatic as Charlie himself. Sometimes they were pleasant, even coyly flirtatious. They would invite me to go camping with them at the Spahn Ranch so that they could re-indoctrinate my misguided and corrupt establishmentarian ways of thinking. When things were going poorly for Charlie, they were menacing and dark-spirited, rubbing the sheath knives they kept lashed to their hips. They were always strangely entertaining, shrouded in mystery, myth, and rumor.
Wow.
Wow. Do you recognize any of that?
Interesting piece of journalism.
Yes. But I wondered if any of that struck is true.
Oh, for sure. Not in the beginning, though. I mean, it was, I would say, the 2 years I spent with him, it was the last year. The first year was really more fun and games, but the second year was menacing. I mean, that's where Charlie got paranoid. The race war was like coming down. The White Album came out. He thought the Beatles were talking to him through the records, and the race war became helter-skelter. And he, there were he was out for money. There was drug deals going on. Some went bad, which caused issue. And we were never into that. We really, not that I was aware of anyway. I mean, maybe that had always been going on under my radar, but I was not aware of that. But he thought he had killed a Black Panther. And so the Straight Satans, entered the scene of a motorcycle group, and, they brought guns and knives and motorcycles and just, drinking, and, because we didn't drink. We really, no, we weren't a drinking group, we smoked marijuana and we took acid, and that was the extent of my knowledge. So it did get very menacing, and Charlie had been working with us from the beginning about how to, because he had the uncanny ability to become all kinds of different people and personalities, and he wanted us to be able to do the same thing, change our facial expression, change who we were to meet the other people's needs, whether, bring in their brokenness or use them, for his own survival or our own survival. He used to talk about, postulating for things. And I think that was really a way of manipulating to get clothes, food, credit cards, money, gas. He was obsessed with getting gas. And I think that was, he was trying to teach us how to morph into the different personalities, different people. He could be the bum on the street, or he could be, he could probably be like an airline pilot or a doctor. He just had this uncanny ability to morph into these different, personalities and people. So, and he had, I think, an uncanny ability to read people for his own good. He wasn't empathetic, but he could read people. He could see their weaknesses, their strengths, and then he would just turn it around and use it for his own, and then he thought he was the coming Christ or a Messiah. He thought that he was going to be the savior of the world somehow. And that he just started believing his own stuff, and which I think plunged him and us into the depths of some real issues, mental illness. To the point where he, they murdered people. It's horrifying. It's just horrifying what happened. It really is. You all know that. In Tarantino's book, we were all, his movie, we were all kind of waiting. I was, because everybody knows the story, right? And we know that his penchant for mayhem, right? It's building, 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 and then the mayhem happened. But it was like it was actually like funny. In a sick way. It was funny that the tables were turned. But
on the Tarantino movie, I was going to ask you this.
Speaking of,
a lot of people have seen it. I presume you obviously saw it. It has a Hollywood ending. When you saw that movie, what was your reaction? Did you think? Obviously Hollywood went a little bit overboard at the end. It was a fairy story.
Right.
But
Once upon a time in Hollywood.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you saw the movie, what was your reaction?
I was kind of horrified, but yet I was thinking, if only it had ended that way. I feel weird saying that, but because these are people that I loved at one point, But if only it had been that way, because I think Tarantino did a really good job. And to me, he brought out a connection with Sharon Tate that I hadn't seen before. She's always been this tragic victim, and the girls told me, Susan Atkins told me what, some of the details of that encounter. And it's just like, bad, just really bad. So, but for me, to see her as this young starlet sneaking into the theater to see herself on the big, it was a side of her that I didn't, it makes it all the more tragic. But on the other, I think Tarantino did an excellent job, in making the fantasy. Yes. Making a horrible occurrence into a fantasy, and yet there's all the iconic Musso and Franks and all the iconic Hollywood stuff.
I must tell you, this is off what we were going to talk about. When I saw that movie, we walked out of the cinema and there was a young couple ahead after seeing that movie, and they said, well, whatever happened to Sharon Tate? Did she carry on with her career? It was weird because they did not know the true story. So, yes. They did not
Oh.
know. They were in their late 20s.
Okay.
How would they know?
Wow.
So let's go back, if we may, Dianne, to April 1968, a year before the murders. What do you remember? What can you tell us about you being arrested with the rest of the family in Ventura County? Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. We were looking for a new place to live. We'd moved out of Topanga, and we were in the bus, and we picked Sycamore Canyon, Leo Carrillo, where the Ventura County line is in there, and the bus got stuck. The wheels got stuck in the mud, and so we camped out. We had sleeping, kind of camping out. It was obviously warm enough. We were in our sleeping bags, and Mary Bruner had just had her baby a few months previous. Anyway,
Who was the father, by the way? Was that
Charlie?
Charlie? Yeah.
Yeah, that, for sure we knew that, yeah.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so middle of the night, or it seemed like the middle of the night to me, we're woken up with sheriff's flashlights, get out of your sleeping bags. And, most of us were sleeping naked because that's what you do when you sleep in a sleeping bag. It's warmer that way. And I had the acid for some reason. I don't know how much. I have 4 tabs, I think, on me, or I knew where it was or whatever. And I'd always heard, that if you get busted, because this is fairly early, it's within that first year, that, you just take it, you just eat it, right? So I ate 4 tabs of acid and got arrested with a fake ID. And if you're from Ventura, you know that the old courthouse up there on the hill, that's where the jail was. They did the other one over there on Hill Street didn't exist. It was this one up on Bolsolay. And so that's where they took us, and they arrested us for trespassing. And they took my fake ID. But I was on acid, and I sang the whole Beatles catalog. That's what it did for me, and everybody sang along, and so I remember it as being a very, curious experience.
But you knew the Beatle catalog, and when I heard many years ago about Manson brainwashing, if you like, with the Beatles lyrics, I thought this was a bunch of old codswallop, but it wasn't, was it? Dianne, I mean, what
Well, I had always loved the Beatles anyway,
yeah.
but...
And so, but it was happening. How did it, what was the method of did he play it many times? And you were on acid, and you knew the lyrics?
Well, that was before the White Album.
Yeah.
But I had been a Beatles fan, all during junior high. So, and actually before that. So I don't think that he really put that in my brain. It was already there. Yeah. And I just, maybe because I was afraid. But back then, it was almost comical, getting arrested in this, basically this park. And it was all kind of disorganized, and they didn't really know what to do with that many people. I think there were maybe 20 of us or 15 anyway. There were a lot. And I remember going to court, and I don't know if they fined us or whatever, but they said time served, for the one night. so they released us, but...
Moving on a bit, I think we're going to move on to a picture of the Spahn Ranch, if we can. Okay, tell us who this gentleman is, and what the hierarchy was on the Spahn Ranch.
That's George Spahn. He was the patriarch of Spahn Ranch, and he was blind. And Lynette Squeaky was really charged with his, primary care by Charlie. Just take care of his needs and you know, Ruby Pearl would kind of take care of the ranch and the horses and stuff, but we all pitched in with Lynette as the lead of taking care of George. And he was kind of oblivious. But he loved the women attention. You know, he really did. And we were careful not to let him know how many people were really around at the ranch.
Dennis Wilson, right?
Yeah.
Now that's an incredible story about, can you tell us a little bit about the Dennis Wilson involvement in the family?
The girls were out, two of the girls, I can't remember now which ones, I can't remember. Huh?
Was it Ella and Patty?
Ella and Patty, that sounds
About right.
But they were out hitchhiking, Dennis picked them up, right? And took them to Spahn Ranch, and so they introduced them to Charlie, and the two of them hit it off. They really did. I mean, Dennis, I think, really liked Charlie, and Charlie obviously liked Dennis, but Charlie was teaching him how to play the guitar, and I got invited right away. I got invited along, I think, with this Nancy Pittman and I think Ruth Moore. Well, no, it wasn't. It couldn't have been Ruth because she came later. But there was like 3 or 4 of us girls got invited to go with Dennis to the Colorado River. His family was having probably a Memorial Day weekend. And so Dennis brought us along, I think, just to antagonize his family, but we didn't know. I just remember going with my bathing suit and a cover-up and in his Rolls Royce to Colorado River. And, we slept on the beach, and his family was not very receptive, but by the end of the weekend, we rode in their boats and we ate their hot dogs, and, it was fun. We had a good time, but that was my first. That was when we first met Dennis. And then we moved in with him, some of us, about half of us.
Where did you move in with him?
Dennis Wilson lived in Pacific Palisades, right off of Sunset. It was just the most incredibly beautiful home. I mean, it was Will Rogers' estate. It was like, so it was all made out of these huge pine logs, whole pine logs, at a fireplace as big as this screen probably, and that's where some of us girls stayed there, and then half of the family Charlie sent to Mendocino in the bus to look for another place, to continue looking for another place to live. And in the meantime, Dennis invited all these bands over, and they would jam together, and we were still dumpster diving. We went dumpster diving in his Rolls Royce, Can you imagine Rolls Royce, pull up, the back of the grocery store and load the trunk with the back seat with boxes of straw. And we made a strawberry cake. I don't know if it was Dennis's birthday or what, but we made him a cake, like a strawberry cake, out of stuff that we found in the dumpster. And he was so impressed. He said he had no idea that this good food was being thrown away. So, it was fun, but then it wasn't fun, and Dennis was kind of a wild man. He was definitely a womanizer. I think he'd been divorced, he had a kid, there was custody issues, and his brothers, I think that the Beach Boys' popularity was a bit waning, and so they were trying to find new stuff, and I think that's what attracted Dennis to Charlie in the first place, is because, maybe this is a guy that has some talent that we can groom, into, or steal his music. I don't know what they were thinking, but we went to Brian Wilson's house in Brentwood, Beverly Hills. It's like south of the freeway off of Sunset. And he had a recording studio, and they recorded some songs, and a couple of us girls were swimming in the pool, and the next thing Charlie comes out and says, "Get your clothes on, girls, we're leaving," and we just like tore out of there, and apparently the recording session didn't go well. Charlie did not want to take instruction. And so this is where like people say, oh, Charlie really wanted to be a rock star. My opinion, from being there and seeing, the opportunity that he had and how much Dennis really did like Charlie, the fact that if Charlie really wanted to be a rock star, I think that he would have put a carrot up his nose and, wore a belly dancer outfit if that's what the Beach Boys said was going to do it for him, right? Make him a rock star. If he really wanted to be a rock star, why wouldn't he have done that? But no, he didn't want to change his hair, his clothes. He got upset when they, tried to change the words to his music. And so, I don't know, whatever happened in the recording studio, that was kind of like the end. And I think that Dennis just couldn't get rid of us, or maybe he was having financial troubles, but he moved out. He moved out, and so therefore the rest of us, moved out.
Dianne, we have another character in this, the son of a milkman from Santa Barbara, as you can see. Can you give us a little nugget about Bobby Bolsolay and how he fit in with the family?
Bobby Bolsolay was a musician in Topanga and Santa Barbara, and I had actually met Bobby at some point, I think before Charlie. So he was kind of making the rounds, with the other musicians in between San Fernando Valley and Santa Barbara. But then he met Charlie, and Charlie really liked him, and they jived with the music, and everybody adored Bobby. I mean, his nickname was Cupid. He was really, he was really good looking, he was very sweet, but he never stuck around. He just would kind of, and Charlie let him, because he was a valuable commodity, keeping the girls happy or whatever. And so Charlie let him kind of come and go as he pleased. But he bit a little bit off more than he could chew. I think that there was some kind of a drug deal when the Straight Satans came into our, for protection. Charlie was kind of using them as, as protection. And they wanted some kind of drugs. And so Gary Hinman had made drugs, or mescaline or something. I don't know. I wasn't privy to all the details. So, but they didn't like it. They didn't like what happened to him, whether it was bad or whatever. So Bobby went and tried to get the money back from Gary, and things just went from bad to worse. And Charlie said, you need to take care of it. And I happened to be at Spahn Ranch, and the phone rang, and I wasn't supposed to answer the phone. The phone was, well, the picture isn't here now, but of the ranch, the phone was down there by the barn. And I was down there by the barn, and the phone was ringing, so I answered it, and it was Mary, and she said, "Get Charlie, and we need help." And so that was a phone call that brought Charlie to Gary's. And I think that, Charlie put pressure on Bobby to take care of it. And so I think that Gary Hinman had actually given him his car, to try to, in lieu of the money, because there was no money anymore. The money was gone. And so that's when Bobby got caught, driving his car, and that's how he ended up going, and he's still in jail. He's still in jail for the murder of Gary Hinman.
There's so many characters in this. I wish we could go on with more about Bobby, but here we have Mr. Melcher, and an interesting little segment there. And again, we haven't talked about Terry Melcher, but what's your memories of Terry Melcher?
Terry Melcher was Doris Day's son, and he was like a record producer. And at Spahn Ranch, I remember Terry came and kind of we did like an audition. And we actually all went to a studio and recorded some songs. And this was Charlie, this is after Dennis. Dennis was, we'd moved on from Dennis's and we were back at the ranch. And this was kind of like a last-ditch effort maybe to make a record on Charlie's part. And so, but it didn't come through. I think they were, they were trying to appease him. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't privy to the details. But all I know is that Charlie had high hopes because he at this point, he didn't want to be a rock star. He just wanted money to help fund this big move and to Death Valley. Because at that point, we had been going to Death Valley, and he had, this vision that, there was going to be this race war called Helter Skelter, and we were going to be hiding out in the bottomless pit in the desert, and that, the black man was going to be the victor, but then they wouldn't know how to rule, and so they were going to come and get us it's crazy. This is crazy talk, right? I mean, but that's what it was. That was the talk. And so when we were out in the desert, we were looking for this bottomless pit. Anyway, so that's what, they were stealing Volkswagens and converting them to dune buggies, and Charlie was talking about hijacking, a gas tanker and digging a big trench and burying it, because, like I said, Charlie was obsessed with gas, and so he wanted to have this, he was trying to have the money to fund this whole, exodus to Death Valley while this race war was taking place.
August 1969, that was the time of the murders. Happily, if you like, you were not around, but...
I was around, though.
But were you around, all right, so you were around, but what about, tell us how you learned about the other members of the family's involvement in these horrendous crimes?
Well, I really didn't. I didn't learn about it until, the murders had happened, and there was an incident with, I woke up, I was in the back house of Spahn Ranch, so not up where George lived, but down the road a quarter mile, there was another house, and that's where we lived. But I woke up to Leslie burning stuff in the fireplace, just a horrible smell, and then a car came down the road, and she said, she hid under the blanket. She says, "Don't let them know I'm here. They just gave me a ride from Griffith Park." So these were like little, in hindsight, it was like, But, so I went to the door and I got rid of these guys, and then she gave me some coins, and then that afternoon I got whisked off to Olancha, which is kind of like a gateway city on 395 to Death Valley. And we'd gone there before. Somebody we knew had a little ranch house off the road, and so it was kind of a meeting place. And so it didn't seem abnormal to me, but I got whisked off there with Juan Flynn, who was one of the ranch hands, and another underaged kid, and Tex was there when we got there. And I went out at 3, in the afternoon looking for food. So I was looking in the dumpster of the little, gas station mini mart, and I got arrested because I didn't have any ID, and they said I was a vagrant or underage runaway or whatever. So they took me to Independence, and I told them about my arrest in Ventura. That I had, I'm 21, and my name's Dianne Bluestein. And so they called Ventura County, and they verified all of that. And so they determined that I was not a runaway, that I was of age, even though I was only like 15. And released me. The arresting officer took me home. I had a sunburn. I spent the night. I got a shower, clean clothes, sunburn treatment, and he took me back to where he picked me up. Gave me $5 and a hat. I went back to the ranch, and Tex now is livid. Where have you been? He's frantic. And he's got a newspaper in his hand with, headlines about these Tate LaBianca murders. And he points to it, slaps it, and he says, "I did this. Charlie told me to." And that was my first knowledge about, whoa, you know, these people murdered? Oh my gosh. And so then it was like, you know, the next day, and now I'd just been in custody. You know, if I'd known that, I would have stayed, you know, I probably would have said, I mean, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that I would have, you know, not said, take me back, you know. Anyway, so from there, then the rest of the family came, and we all went up to Death Valley, and it was just like a survival mission for the next, you know, next month or two. And we ended up there were 2 raids, but it was not because of the murders. It was because we had burned, I didn't, but I was with the guys that there was a road grader that had blocked the road while we were out looking for this bottomless pit, and we came back and there was a mountain of rocks that, you know, was blocking our, you know, getting back. And so we got around that, and here's this road grader. So the guys got the gas tanks and they poured gas all over the tires, and they lit it on fire. I mean, that was the only thing that burned was the tires. But that's what they arrested us for then in October. And so I was hiding under a bush. I saw the whole thing. I mean, they put all the other girls, you know, in pickup trucks, and, you know, I could hear I was close enough to hear the walkie-talkies, and I'm thinking, I'm under this bush, under a bush, and under this kind of tapestry-colored coat all day. And I'm thinking, Charlie would be so proud of me. It's like, what? And then everybody was gone, and it's dark, and now it's like, what am I going to do? So I walk in the dark, thinking every rock, every branch is a snake. I walk back to where we were hiding out under these parachutes, you know, a couple of miles back in the desert. Nobody's there. I walk back. I climbed in the bus. I start covering because it was kind of like a free-for-all clothes depository. I start covering myself because it's cold. It's October. Death Valley is hot maybe in the day, but at night it's cold. So I'm covering myself up with these clothes, and the next thing I know, I have somebody's hands are around my neck. It's like, oh my God, it was Kathy Gillis. She had also managed to escape, you know, this raid. And so that was, you know, kind of comforting, but I'm thinking, you know, I kind of wish I'd been arrested again. And then it was a couple of days later that Charlie and Susan and Bruce came up, and then I was in the middle of washing my hair when the door just banged open, and I had a gun in my face. You know, it was like, put your hands up, and you're under arrest. And Charlie disappeared like that, and I think that in somewhere there's a picture of him. He had ran into the bathroom, and just like a tiny little bathroom vanity, somehow he squeezed himself under the sink. But a little tuft of his hair was sticking out, so that's how they found him.
That was the arrest. Let's just jump forward to January 1971. And there was a little girl, I was in the courtroom, end of the trial, a little girl came in to testify. She looked a bit scared. I think that little girl was you. And when you testified as I think the last witness, what was going through your mind? Because Manson was there. Tell us your mindset at that awful occasion that you went into.
I was, you know, I'd been through a lot. I had, you know, come through a lot. I felt normal. You know, I was going to high school, living with a nice family, and now I have to go to trial against the family. And I was so afraid that Charlie, because I used to hear his voice, I was so afraid that he was going to get in my head, you know, testifying, and that he was going to, you know, get in my head and make me say stuff that he wanted me to say, you know, not that was truth. But one of the first things that I think they asked me was like, did you love Charlie? Did you? And I said, yeah, guess so, because I did love him. I mean, I didn't love him anymore, but I had loved him. And so that's what I answered. And Charlie jumps up and he says, she loved everybody. And there was just something about the way he said that, oh, he wasn't in my head. And I could see him as the little master manipulator clown. You know, he was just performing. He was just performing. And so it was a great relief. It was a great relief. And they threatened me with perjury because I had lied on the grand jury. But despite that fear of being arrested or charged with perjury, I just wanted to tell the truth. I mean, this experience had been pretty traumatic, and I was just shaken to my core that these people that I had accepted as family could do something like that. I mean, I really didn't see that. But see, when I disobeyed Charlie, I was no longer I was not close with him anymore. Not really. I was just kind of a hanger-oner, and I think Gypsy was kind of charged with, making sure that I didn't get in his hair. I don't know. But so I wasn't privy to that. But there was all this stuff going on. The murder school. He showed us how to use, how to kill somebody, and gave us all buck knives. But in my mind, Charlie was he played mind games all the time. Like hold your finger. He'd hold our fingers over a flame, and say, the pain is just your imagination. You don't, it's all in your mind. Things like that. You don't need food. So that's how I viewed that little murder school lesson, was that it was a mind game. It was just like, in order to not be killed, you had to be willing to kill. So,
Dianne,
I don't know.
You must tell us, I mean, there was you, this scrambled-brained, sorry about that, young woman.
Hey, I was.
And you had a guy called Jack Gardner, who was your Gardner, the guardian angel. Here he is. Tell us how that was your salvation, if you like.
Well, after being arrested, and then we testified in front of the grand jury, and that was the first time I told him how old I was. That was 2 months, because we were arrested in October, and I think the grand jury was in December. And in front of the bailiff, I said, my name is Dianne Lake, I'm 16, and I want my mommy. And I really did. I mean, I'd had good food and no drugs, for a couple of months now. And, I'd overheard the matrons saying, oh, these poor girls, they're never going to make it. And I was reading more and just becoming a regular person, And so they made me a ward of the court when they found out I was only 16, and they committed me to a mental hospital for a 90 days observation, which became 9 months. Right before school was going to start in September, this man, this angel, Jack Gardner, and his wife took me in. He was my arresting officer in Inyo County. He saw something worth redeeming or something worthy in me. He and his wife took me into their family. They had a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter, and they took me into their home in this tiny little community, off of 395, where everybody knows everybody, right? And he was the undersheriff. But he gave me back my self-worth and my self-esteem, and I had it, it was all good, and I really think that they kept me in the hospital for as long as they did, because, hey, I learned how to play the flute, I learned how to crochet, I had all these moms, I became a healthy person, and so they felt like I was mentally capable of being a good witness, for the prosecution. And
Sorry, go ahead.
so he took me
He
in,
was
gave me
fantastic.
back my self-worth, and
Yep. We're running out of time, but I want to ask you this, obviously. You've written a terrific book, and it took you a long time to get to the stage of spilling your guts, telling your story. What went into those elements? I mean, you had children. Did they know about you? Tell us.
yeah, it'd been a pretty closely held secret. I was very much ashamed to be associated with the Manson family. I didn't really want anybody to know. I told my pastor, and I told a couple of friends. Well, actually, yeah, I told a couple of friends, and that didn't, they were just kind of like, ooh, I became a little bit of an untouchable to those people that I had told, and so I stopped telling people. And so it was a highly guarded secret, and then there was a detective who had a cadaver dog, and the cadaver dog had alerted to bodies or human remains up in Death Valley. And so he called me, which was nice of him. This is like in 2008, 2009, and told me that he got permission to dig, and if they found bodies, I was going to be smack dab in the middle of it, because the information that they were going on was from Jack Gardner's partner. They said that I had said that there were bodies buried up there. I'm not aware that there were bodies up there. I think what I said was that there could have been. There could be, because when we lived up in Death Valley, there's all kinds of hermits and miners and vagrants or whatever that would just kind of pass through, and then they disappear, and even members of the family. People that would come in as members of the family and then they would be gone. So I don't, obviously there's a history of people being killed by the Manson family. And so I probably said that. But anyway, he gave me a heads up, and they did do the dig, and they didn't find any remains. But I had to tell my kids, and my kids were like my oldest was college, and my daughter, I think, was high school. We didn't tell the youngest one, but I did not want them to find out, by a news media article. And so I told them, and my son, he doesn't remember this, but I remember he's at one point he slept with a baseball bat under his bed for a couple of weeks. It kind of freaked him out, And my daughter, though, she thanked my husband. She said, "Thank you for loving mommy." So it was, it was very good. And then I just kind of tucked it away, right? And then my husband died. My husband of 36 years died in 2014. And he was kind of floundering. I got grief counseling, and I was trying to find myself, and I went to a motivation seminar, and they took me through an exercise from birth to death. And I had this epiphany that now was maybe the time to write my story, and so I got a life coach, and the life coach, I wrote my memories, and she said, get an agent, and I just felt like God opened up all the doors, led me to the right agent. The agent's wife became my co-author, and it just, everything just clicked, and we wrote that book in like 4 months. Wow. And we got the publisher was awesome, and I don't know, it was very cathartic and very therapeutic for me to open up and tell that story, because it had been this skeleton, we all have skeletons in our closet, but this was a particularly
big skeleton.
nasty skeleton, and so it's been very good. It's been very good for me, and I feel like maybe this is a cautionary tale for others. Sex trafficking. Dr. Phil called it love bombing, and it's almost like heroin, and I've never taken heroin, but from what I've heard is that everybody, they get addicted because they want that first trip again. That first trip is just so incredible that they keep taking it because they want to have that same, well, I think that's why I stayed with Charlie, because that first meeting where they all knew me, you know, was so powerfully, you know, I felt so loved and so accepted that I kept hanging in there, hoping that that was going to come back. That's, you know, that's what so in my process, I mean, I hadn't read everybody's books, you know, I'm not an expert. There's so many theories, there's so many rabbit holes that this story has taken, but I've tried to remain pretty pure to my experience because I don't want to get caught up in all the, you know, and I don't want to become an expert, you know, because there's all the, you know, these crime people that try to analyze everything and, anyway.
We have a lot of questions, I'm sure.
I'm sure, yeah.
And so, Eric, can you go ahead with that, please?
Yes, we have a few minutes for Q&A. We're going to take questions from here in the audience, and we also have some questions from Zoom. We'd love to start with
about 25 minutes.
audience here. Also,
To 8.
Denise over here has a microphone, so anyone on the other side can raise your hand as well.
Hi, I'm David. Could you please tell me if Charles Manson was political? Did he talk about issues of the day?
No, not to me, not in the group talks. No, we didn't do politics. We did watch on George Spahn's TV. We did watch the moon landing.
Can everybody hear the question, by the way? Everybody hear the question? Yes, okay. Go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering if you had any communication with Manson after he was arrested at all?
No.
The question was, did you, sorry, I'll just repeat it, but just in case for those. Did you have any communication with Manson afterwards? And the answer was?
After the arrest?
Yes.
No, I did not. I did have, you know, all of the girls when we were still in Inyo County before Susan Atkins, you know, started telling her cellmate what was going on. All the girls in Inyo County were in one cell and all the guys were in another. And so, you know, we were being admonished by the different girls not to say anything.
So you talked to the girls?
We talked to, yeah, I talked to the girls for sure.
What
But
was the general sentiment? Was it,
don't say anything. Charlie's innocent.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having the courage to turn your life around and become the fine lady you are today. And about Tujunga, I have some questions. I might have seen it in Mr. Davis's book. There was a gentleman who lived there, and every day he would go to the post office, and one day he didn't show up, and they went to the house and said, hey, what's going on? And there were some hippie-type people there, and he was found stabbed like 2 days later. I'm wondering if you remember anything like that, or the second question is, did it seem like Tex Watson was the crazy man he was, or did he just go nuts from all this time of events?
Did you get that, the whole question?
The first one was, I don't know what the context of that question about the man who went to the post office every day and then he didn't.
He lived in Olanka in 1969.
Where did he live?
He lived in Olanka, just down from where the mini marts were you talked about.
In Olancha?
Yeah.
Oh. No, I've never even heard that story. I know nothing about that.
Okay, and as for the Tex Watson, did he seem like a homicidal maniac when he was hanging out at the ranch, or did he just go snapped off?
Yeah, I think he just snapped off. I mean, I think Tex took more than hallucinogenics. I think he'd been a wig maker, you know, before Charlie met him, and I think that he did other drugs. So
Okay.
Tex was like a big brother to me. He taught me how to drive.
We have a bunch of questions from the Zoom as well as I know some more here. We're going to do one question from Zoom and then Sir will go over to you. Janice at home is asking, did your parents ever express regret for their part in your emancipation and eventual joining of the family?
Yes, yes. Both my parents have had, my father is gone now, but he said, oh, we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm sorry about that, And they both remarried, they both, became homeowners. They turned their lives around as well after this.
I have a kind of a slightly uncomfortable thought that I was having while you were talking, and that is that on the night that one of the murders was committed, I don't know if it was the Tate or the Lobby Monkey murder, you said that you were just down the road at Spahn Ranch in a cabin. What if Charlie had asked you to go? How difficult a decision would that be for a 15-year-old girl to make?
I'm glad that he didn't. I can't imagine, knowing who I am and who I even was then, that I would have. He never would have asked me, and he didn't ask me. But he didn't, he didn't trust me. I was a liability. I would have run away. I could not have done that. I mean, and I don't know how they could have done it either. I really don't, but they did.
Another question from Zoom, and apologies to the audience at home. Ivor, can we do that thing where you repeat the question because they're having a hard time hearing it at home? The next question is from our board chair, Kate McLean, who's on Zoom. Kate asks, when did you change your life and how?
When did you change your life and how? You've told us a little bit about it, but any other extras?
I think really what changed my life was being in the hospital, learning how, getting away from drugs, becoming a useful unit of society, and then my arresting officer taking me in, giving me, my self-worth back, going to school, and then he got me into college, and then a friend who is now my husband, my second husband, he said, you're hot, you need to get out of LA. He said, come and live with me in Spokane. And so I, for the summer, so I went up there. It was just an incredibly beautiful summer. By the end of the summer, I was supposed to go back to college, and he said, well, we fell in love is what happened. We fell in love, and he said, don't go back to college. Let's save our money and go to Europe, right? So we did. We saved our money, got some other jobs, took backpacks, and, we were only going to be gone for maybe 6 weeks. We ended up being there for, like 2.5 years. And I wrote my mom like 20 letters, 20-page each, and I never mentioned. So this whole episode of my life was in my rear view mirror. I was moving forward. I did not resent my parents for presenting that lifestyle to me. And so I just moved on. I just moved away from it. And it's, I think that's really what changed. That's what changed. It's not holding on to the bitterness and the regret and the, the ugliness. It was just like, out of there.
We have time for 2 more. We're going to take one up here, and then Denise, you can pick someone from the other side of the room.
Hi, Dianne. I'm Duke from the Chatsworth Historical Society. First of all, I'd like to thank you for all the time, applaud you for all the times you defied Charlie. It actually ended up helping you in the end. And my question is, how tall was Manson? And Ivor, can you stand up? Who was taller, Charlie or Ivor? Because you heard all kinds of different reports on how tall.
I'm only 5'1" now, but I used to be 5'3", and he was a little bit taller than me. So he might have been 5'4",
I'm 6'4", by the way.
Wow.
Hi there. You mentioned when you were talking about someone having a baby, and I was wondering, were there lots of children born into that situation?
There were, Barry Bruner had a baby, and I was there when she delivered, and Susan Atkins had a baby, and I was there, and I actually cut the umbilical cord of that little baby. And then there were other babies that came that weren't necessarily born in that situation. I mean, the only baby that I know that was Charlie's was Mary Bruner's.
Thank you. Eric?
That is all the time we have for questions. Apologies to those we didn't get to. Fascinating program. And before we go, we're going to announce the winners of our opportunity drawing. We held a drawing for members. We have two winners. One is going to receive an autographed book of Dianne's, and one is going to receive an autographed book of Ivor's. And the winner of the book, the Ivor Davis book, is Tessa Weeks. I don't know if Tessa is here. It doesn't matter. She won the book regardless, here or not. Yay, Tessa. And Steve Chalkins is the winner of the autographed Dianne Lake book.
That's the famous Steve Chalkins from the LA Times and many other publications.
Oh, okay. So somebody you know.
Yes. So it wasn't fixed, by the way. And by the way, don't forget that Dianne will be signing.
I'm getting to that right now. And before I rattle on too long, just please remember that the Museum of Ventura County is a member-supported organization. Please consider becoming a member right now by visiting venturamuseum.org so we can continue offering free admission to everyone who comes to visit our exhibits and gardens in Ventura and in Santa Paula. Your membership supports our education programs, our exhibits, everything we do here. So please consider that. And if you're here in person, please make sure to purchase a book right now and get it signed before you head out. You can see the tables getting set up right there in front of the pavilion. Join us for the next Ivor Davis Up Close and Personal with Bob Eubanks on Thursday, April 28th.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks to everyone at home for making time. Donate.
And thank you, Dianne.